I love you. I love you. God bless you.
Many people across the country continue grieving the loss of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Kirk was killed while speaking at Utah Valley University on Wednesday. 22-year-old Tyler Robinson was arrested more than 24 hours later.
Imagine a world where nothing is as it seems. A hidden plot, whispers in shadowy corridors, and a revelation that could shake everything you thought you knew. In the mystical truth behind Charlie Kirk's assassination lies a shocking discovery that no one else will dare to uncover. What really happened? Who's pulling the strings? And why has this story been hidden from the public eye? Stick around, because what we reveal next will leave you questioning reality itself.
So this is one of the more difficult speeches I've given. But my favorite moments with him were actually when we were together one-on-one. It was often backstage. It was often in a long car ride across the state, or on a couple occasions a flight across the country. And we would have conversations that were often philosophical, even occasionally theological in nature. He was curious, very open to being challenged, not in a way that was winning an argument, but in a way that was getting to what was true. And we pushed each other. We had a lot of fun in those conversations.
It was a crisp September morning at Utah Valley University, the kind of day that felt too ordinary ever to carry the weight of tragedy. Students filtered into the auditorium, buzzing with the electric anticipation that always accompanied a high-profile event. Charlie Kirk's American Comeback Tour had rolled into town, and the hall was alive with energy. Supporters eager to cheer, critics ready to spar, and curious onlookers drawn to the spectacle. Phones flashed, voices blended into a constant hum, and every eye was fixed on the stage where Kirk stood, commanding attention. The discussion had been tense but lively, sparking both applause and groans from the audience. Then came a question that pierced the room with eerie resonance. A student asked how many mass shooters America had seen over the last decade. Kirk leaned into the mic, ready with his familiar brand of sharp rhetoric. His final words hung in the air like an unfinished sentence. Counting or not counting gang violence? The question mark barely left his lips before the air was ripped open. A single shot, sudden, precise. The sound thundered through the hall, echoing off the walls and silencing the crowd in an instant. The bullet found its mark in the side of Kirk's neck. His body recoiled, knees buckling, as shock spread across his face, then collapsed into chaos. Gasps erupted into screams. Students scrambled for cover, and staff rushed the stage. For a split second, time seemed suspended, every movement stretching into unbearable slow motion. Then the scene detonated into pandemonium. Security swarmed as blood pooled on the polished wood of the stage. Attendees clutched each other, some frozen in disbelief, others fleeing in terror. Phones that had been recording moments earlier now captured the unthinkable. Kirk was rushed off the stage, carried with desperate urgency through a side exit. Paramedics pushed through the crowd, their voices sharp with commands.
All these moments that I shared just in the last few days, the books that I've read to my kids, going up to their bedroom and kissing them and hugging them before bed, I just realized that all of these moments that I get to have, Charlie is not able to have them anymore. And Charlie's kids and his beautiful wife are not able to have them anymore. And maybe the best way that I can contribute and the best way that I can honor my dear friend is to be the best husband that I can be, to be the kind of husband to my wife that he was to his.
Within minutes, he was on his way to Timpanogos Regional Hospital, but the damage had already been done. At just 31 years old, Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA and one of the most polarizing conservative voices in America, had been silenced in front of hundreds. For years, he had been both idolized and vilified, praised for his influence among young conservatives and criticized for his rhetoric that fueled division. That morning, he became more than a controversial figure. He became a victim in a story that would shake the nation. The hospital confirmation came swiftly, and with it, the chilling finality that no one in that auditorium could yet process. The news spread like wildfire across every platform, headlines lighting up phones within minutes. Charlie Kirk, assassinated at Utah Valley University. His death wasn't just another headline. It was a seismic jolt to American politics, an act that blurred the line between ideology and violence in a way that felt both surreal and inevitable. Outside the university, confusion reigned. Reporters swarmed the campus, cameras capturing the frantic exodus of students whose faces bore the weight of shock. Parents flooded phone lines, desperate to know if their children were safe. Rumors spread faster than facts, each new detail adding layers to the chaos. Was it a lone wolf, a political statement, a random act of madness? No one knew, but everyone felt the chilling reality. A public figure had been assassinated in plain view, and America had just crossed into uncharted territory. The auditorium, once filled with anticipation, was now a crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across doors, investigators combed through abandoned bags and shattered phones. The silence that replaced the morning's buzz was deafening. For the students who had been there, the memory of that shot would echo long after the headlines faded. The day had begun with excitement, but by its end, it had carved a scar into the national psyche. And in that silence, where questions outnumbered answers, the weight of what had just happened began to settle. A nation wasn't just mourning a man, it was bracing for the storm his death would unleash.
So let me just say quickly about Charlie. I've known him since he was a teenager, just an amazing person. But the two things that stick out, he's a Christian man. And we talked about that a lot, including, just the other day. There's a lot of pressure on public people, people who run huge, $100 million a year nonprofits. And there are a lot of pitfalls and traps. That's why so many of them are destroyed. And Charlie really did, without, betraying details, like he walked the line for real. It was the topic of many conversations between us because I've seen so many people destroyed. Most people are destroyed by power, and he wasn't. And I just really admire that. To his last moments, in order, he cared about God, his wife, and his children, and then his country. And that was totally real, completely real.
Tyler James Robinson was the name whispered through newsrooms and across social media within hours. 22 years old, from Washington, Utah, a quiet town where the biggest scandal usually involved a high school football game gone wrong. His background read like a blueprint of middle America. Raised in a conservative household, Sunday mornings in church, a family that believed in traditional values. But that clean-cut narrative fractured as investigators dug deeper. Behind the facade of a normal upbringing lay a descent into something far darker. Robinson's recent years told a different story, one that traced through glowing screens and endless online debates. He had spent long hours in gaming communities and on Reddit threads, slowly absorbing fringe ideologies that stood in direct opposition to the values he was raised with. It wasn't an overnight transformation, it was gradual, the way a drip of water can eventually hollow out stone. He went from conservative son to radicalized outsider, picking up leftist ideologies, venting frustrations in online spaces where irony and rage blurred into something toxic. His family noticed the change. Tension built in the home. Arguments flared. By the time he moved out, Robinson was no longer the boy they recognized. Adding to the complexity was his relationship with a transgender partner. For a man raised in a rigid environment, it marked a turning point that widened the gulf between him and his family. Friends described him as increasingly withdrawn, lost in a world of digital anger and conspiratorial thinking. And the question that echoed louder with each revelation was unsettling. How does someone from a conservative home, raised under discipline and tradition, end up pulling a trigger in a packed auditorium? The evidence told its own haunting story. Found near the scene was a Mauser M98 bolt-action rifle, wrapped in a towel as if the act could hide the crime. The weapon carried the cold weight of intent. No accident, no hesitation. Alongside it, investigators discovered a screwdriver with traces of Robinson's DNA, likely used to disassemble and transport the rifle without detection. But it was the bullet casings that sent chills through even the most hardened investigators. Each casing bore engravings, words etched into the metal with deliberate precision.
The friends of this show and of Charlie that knew him best, the Thought Crime crew, to be here in the studio to commemorate our friend, our dear brother, for this sacred, this solemn moment, this occasion none of us ever dreamed we would have to do. And here we are, because Charlie would want us to be here. He would be upset if we weren't here. And we, of course, have left his chair open and empty because nobody will ever fill it.
These weren't random scrawls. They were messages, a hybrid of ideology, internet irony, and raw hatred. Forensic teams studied them, but the meaning remained tangled. Part political statement, part internet joke, part cryptic riddle. Every piece of evidence pulled the case deeper into confusion. DNA confirmed what many had already suspected: Robinson had been there, and he had fired the weapon. But the why still floated in a fog no one could pierce. Every detail added weight, but none explained the full transformation. 2 days after the shooting, Robinson was arrested. The break came not from a high-tech FBI sting, but from his own family, who recognized him in surveillance photos and tipped off authorities. It was a stunning betrayal in his eyes. His family, who had once argued and pleaded with him, were the very reason he was caught. But if investigators hoped his arrest would bring clarity, they were mistaken. From the moment he was in custody, Robinson shut down. No cooperation, no explanation, no hint of remorse or justification. Silence. Authorities pressed, his lawyers maneuvered, but the suspect's lips stayed sealed. His family provided insights into his radicalization. His partner shared glimpses of his personal turmoil. Yet still, the core question remained untouched. The silence didn't calm the storm, it amplified it. A killer who could speak but refused. A crime so meticulously executed but cloaked in mystery. Was his motive political, personal, or something far stranger that the engraved bullets only hinted at? Was this truly the act of one man or part of something larger, an unseen network feeding his dissent? Every discovery left behind an echo, every unanswered question pulled the nation further into the chilling unknown. And as Robinson sat in custody under special watch, refusing to break, one truth became impossible to ignore. The story was not finished, and the darkest answers had yet to surface. The nation stood still as the news spread. A memorial service was quickly arranged, with plans confirmed that President Trump himself would attend. Underscoring the weight of the moment, the air around the service was thick with sorrow, mothers clutching their children tighter, elderly veterans bowing their heads, students holding candles with trembling hands. Yet behind every tearful embrace was a darker undercurrent: outrage, confusion, and a gnawing sense that something in American society had fundamentally ruptured. Commentators clashed over the meaning of it all. Was this the result of unchecked extremism, or was it the inevitable product of a society tearing itself apart? For many, it wasn't simply a crime. It was a mirror held up to a divided nation. The streets outside the memorial became a quiet stage for silent protests, some holding placards calling for unity, others warning of civil war. And in the middle of this whirlwind, one question loomed. What happens next when grief turns to action?
I'm heartbroken and devastated at the death of Charlie Kirk for a couple reasons. Number one, I mourn for his wife. I mourn for his children. I mourn for his loved ones. I mourn for all of those that loved him. And as a human who has empathy, regardless of your political views or where you stand on the aisle, right now it's time to mourn with those that are mourning and weep with those that are weeping. And so that is what I'm literally and figuratively doing. When I look into so much of what people love and loved Charlie Kirk for, I'm like, okay, Emmanuel, your empathy is birthed from a belief that no person should die before their time.
But just as mourners tried to make sense of their grief, the mystery only deepened. Tyler James Robinson remained silent in custody, leaving investigators and the public with more questions than answers. Was he acting alone, or was he just one thread in a far more dangerous network? Forensic teams combed through his online history and uncovered trails of late-night conversations in obscure chat rooms, anonymous message boards, and encrypted channels. Words exchanged in whispers of anonymity suggested not just disillusionment, but coordination. And yet, no definitive proof tied Robinson to any wider conspiracy. The puzzle pieces fit together too neatly to be ignored, yet not tightly enough to tell the full story. What drove this young man to transform from a conservative household's pride to the face of political violence? Was it ideology, desperation, or something more personal festering deep inside him? Every discovery seemed to open a dozen new doors, each darker than the last. As experts weighed in, one theme began to dominate. This was no longer about a single man and his rifle. It was about the fragility of a nation. Robinson's story, his upbringing, his radicalization, his silence, wasn't just his alone. It was a symptom of a society where identity, politics, and ideology clash in increasingly violent ways. The assassination became more than a headline. It was a haunting reminder of how the internet can twist loneliness into extremism, and how political divides can turn citizens into soldiers for causes they barely understand. America found itself staring into an abyss, questioning not only how this happened, but whether it could happen again. The broader implications struck fear into households nationwide. If a boy from small-town America, once described by neighbors as polite and reserved, could become an assassin, then who else might be on that path? Parents worried about their children's online lives. Lawmakers clashed over how to regulate extremism, and communities whispered about the possibility of copycat attacks. The story forced Americans to confront the uncomfortable truth that radicalization is not a distant phenomenon. It can grow in the room next door, behind a screen, or even at the dinner table. And so, as the nation grappled with grief and unanswered questions, the assassination stood as a chilling testament to what happens when ideology fuses with personal despair. The silence of Robinson may never be broken, but the echoes of his actions will not fade soon. In the end, the most haunting question of all remains: how does a society prevent another tragedy like this when the seeds of division are already so deeply sown?